Watchers. In the beginning. Welcome. So, why are you here? I know why I am here. I seek knowledge, and I let that knowledge lead me to the truth. Are you here searching for answers, or are you just bored? People come for many reasons. More lately, people can feel this world's energy changing, and it is not a good change. The Watchers.
My name is Lily, and I am a watcher, one of the ancient Fari.
The old human asks a good question. Why are we here? And who are the Fari?
The Fari are a myth. They are an old legend hidden in your past, like so many other truths. There are few of us left here on Earth, and even fewer that have the training and the skills required to slow ourselves enough so your limited senses can see and hear us.
We are the Watchers.
And we follow Ganaran. She is the mother of all life. We are her eyes, and she is our shelter.
Earth is our home.
We have watched her devastated by fire and frozen in ice by our father the sun, and destroyed by the darkness in between. The Great Father also gave our mother many great miracles, the Fari and humans included.
Although the short history of the monkey men has shown great promise.
They have also caused great disappointment to our mother.
It is time for the truth to be told. The Holy Ones have passed, but their legacy remains. You need to know the past that has been hidden from you, hidden by those who crave power and control. You need to know who the Holy Ones were, what they created, and what was lost.
The Watchers. The Emperor and Kira sent the royal diplomatic team on another attempt to negotiate with the Draconian horde. Classified urgent, but with little expectation that it would succeed any more than the last 27 efforts. The senior diplomatic team knew they were wasting their time, but sanctions, trade embargoes, and boycotts were ignored and did nothing but fuel the Draconians' aggressive expansion. The Draconians had two main factions and thousands of minor lords that competed amongst each other for resources. They built larger and more powerful ships and large military capabilities to control the ever-growing need for resources. Large-scale wars, some lasting for generations, decimated their numbers, so they found ways to increase their birth rate. Their queens grew enormous and bred millions of eggs in her lifetime. And every faction had their own queen. The Draconians continued to expand their violence. System after innocent system fell to their might. Those that surrendered served them as slaves. Those that resisted were destroyed. The easy victories only made them bolder. The Empire did not just have a shared religion. It was ingrained so deeply into their combined cultures that peace had reigned for millennia. Their ideology is based on scientific evidence, medical research, and intense quantum particle applications that had been discovered ages ago and refined over thousands of years. They proved that every living being, large or small, emitted a unique quantum frequency, similar to a magnetic field, but infinitely more complex in nature. They developed the sensors to detect this quantum charge, and it translated as a colored Ori, or aura, as it is pronounced today. The proof was undeniable. The science provided facts, and the facts changed the Empire and every species they had encountered so far, with the exception of the Draconian hordes. Their most progressive research was showing how all quantum charges were bound together in a way they still did not understand. They continued to develop more sophisticated and much more powerful sensors, and whole societies were dedicated to furthering what they considered their most important scientific field. The basic sensors were developed into a small, handheld version, shaped like many of their medical instruments, as a slim silver wand. On a high level, the silver wand emits a quantum tone that excites the aura of any living thing within its range. The quantum energy appears as a soft light of in the visible realm. The frequency and intensity of the aura's quantum charge controls the color. Plants, trees, and the like were shades of yellows, but the older trees have started to turn a green shade. For minor creatures, their light appears as shades of darker green, mostly considered food to the higher life forms that range from lighter green to turquoise. Darker turquoise tinges shows that the animal is maturing. Their continuous research determined that the blue quantum energy had additional qualities. Beings with blue, even dark turquoise, had sentient abilities. But more remarkably, quantum energy was flowing in both directions. The lower energy beings appeared to feed whatever, or wherever, the combined quantum energy was connecting us to. The blue aura was stronger and could draw on the quantum energy. The results of such events were barely registering in most blue aura. Only the brightest and lightest blue aura managed to affect the connection, and usually only in times of extreme trauma. A blue O-Re indicated intelligence, problem solving, and most importantly, free will, not just instinct. Some of the larger animal species and sophisticated predators with a darker turquoise O-Re could problem solve but were bound strongly to instincts. True sentience was determined when the aura was blue, and the lighter the blue, the more intensely the sensors responded to their energy. The Empire called it many things, but in the imperial court it would translate to the doctrine of the light. The fairies called it the O-Re. The Draconians called it myth. The Greys didn't know, or likely didn't care about anything they considered useless. The Watchers. The Empire's ideology was fueled by science and research, and as the technology grew, the doctrine of the white light bloomed and raced through the stars. Their research showed that the lighter the individual's O-Re, the stronger their natural gifts were. They were discernibly smarter, stronger, and faster. Every being in the No universe was scanned as they searched for the brightest auras. First to study, but they immediately started offering advanced training in whatever gifts their natural talents excelled at. Hierarchies were quickly developed, and the lightest O-Re were instant elite, executives, regional governors that replaced the old lords. The birth of a new empire built and maintained based on the strength of their quantum signature. Poor children became lords, family kingdoms dissolved, and new ones were born. Soon, a child was born with a white O-Re. The family was poor, but a white quantum signature was unique. It was strong and growing stronger as the child grew. This changed everything. At first, there was resistance. People with power do not lose their influence quietly, but the white O-Re radiated more energy than anyone previously recorded. The researchers were both astonished and humbled. This child was very special. The doctrine of the white light was ingrained across the empire. Any dissenters found their own worthiness scrutinized and had to submit to the growing doctrine. The child was quickly crowned emperor. This had a unifying effect, and more species adopted the divine sciences, and most cultures became amazingly peaceful very quickly. Other species made mistakes, and they took longer. The aura was proven to be a quantum reflection of your immortal connection to what was beyond mortal life. The part of you that existed beyond our perception of time and space. A part of us that is here to grow, to learn, to love. Of course, there was evil in the universe. From the beginning of the studies, it was found that violence always leads to more violence. But more importantly, anyone that gloried in death and harming others gained an accumulating red stain in their quantum field. The detectors were refined to detect the red stain, and the infected were banished to the lost worlds beyond the Empire's farthest settlements. They were provided for, but they did not flourish. The Watchers. The Draconians were different. Diplomacy did not work with them. The Draconian culture believed that the powerful should rule the weak, and the negotiations, and what they considered as hollow threats, had not deterred them. The Empire had watched in terror as the Draconians developed the technology to reach the stars and quickly began to dominate every world that they encountered. They stole technology, resources, and weapons. They took prisoners that they made into slave labor. They grew stronger with each victory and built larger and larger fleets. Now, their fleets were a growing threat to the rest of the galaxy. The Draconians used violent aggression and intimidation to subjugate others and any species that they could not control. They destroyed. Entire worlds had been turned to glass and ash because they opposed the powerful Draconians. The Empire had many ships but refused to use violence in any manner. They had superior shield technology, but no weapons that could oppose a united Draconian fleet. More importantly, the Empire maintained peace through devout laws and beliefs. They would sacrifice their freedom, likely their lives, before they would stain their souls using violence against another. The Empire watched in fear as the Council argued and debated. Decades pass as diplomacy continued to fail and the violence of the Draconian fleet continued to grow. Other options were discussed, evaluated, and discarded as ineffective or incurred violence. Negotiating was the only viable option for the Empire, but the Draconians worshipped strength and power, not diplomacy. They saw the Empire as weak, and the lack of physical resistance only bolstered their arrogance and fueled their violent expansion. It seemed inevitable that not that far into the future, the Draconians will grow strong enough and arrogant enough to attack Empire space. Shield technology has become priority research on all Empire worlds, combining the best minds, unlimited resources, and unprecedented collaboration into designing stronger and more efficient shield technologies. Not primarily for their fleets, but for their worlds and space centers. It was through this research that they discovered the quantum properties of the O-Re and how it is woven into the fabric of time and space. The continuous efforts put into the research garnered astounding results. They discovered that the same technology that they had developed for the shields was also able to fold space. They ever larger ships, with faster-than-light engines, with better and better shield technology. The power generator and shields of the HELIO were a new design that could generate and absorb enormous amounts of energy. They could handle a kinetic energy impact up to 10-fold the mass of the ship. The shields absorbed the extreme heat and pressures from any energetic impact and converted it into energy that only made the shield stronger and more resilient. They had limitations, and the Draconians were already building ever larger weapons into their fleets. The Helios was impervious to anything the largest Draconian ships could send at them, possibly 2 capital ships. But the Draconians already had thousands of military ships built, and the HELIO crew knew the risks. The Watchers. In the beginning, the massive ship dropped back into normal space exactly where the AI had predicted. The crew felt the familiar shudder of the ship as they continued their duties, unaware of what is waiting for them.
Shields at maximum.
The prince reacted instantly when a fleet of draconian warships filled every holographic display. They were all charged and ready to fire, which they did. In perfect coordination, every plasma cannon in the fleet fired in unison. The prince watched as dark space lit up with white spots of light that grew in size and brilliance as they approached. The massive ship shook violently, and the shields blazed under a sudden barrage of plasma fire. Warning lights appeared on all displays, showing critical alerts as the ship was on the brink of being torn apart.
Emergency maneuvers! Get the FTL back online!
The prince's voice was strained as he struggled to hold his composure. The navigation officer blinked twice before responding.
What are the coordinates, sir?
Your discretion, pilot. Just do it now.
But, sir, the prince struggled to hold back his primal emotions as the ship continues to take more damage. The navigation officer was used to receiving precise directions and not sure how to proceed. Breaking protocol was a serious offense.
Just do it now. Evasive maneuvers and get the FTL charged!
The panic in the prince's voice was evident as the ship continued to be pommeled with plasma blasts. The pilot only hesitated another second, but the look in the prince's eyes was enough to convince him to obey. With a nod to the navigator, they input coordinates quickly, not having them confirmed or checked before the pilot engaged the FTL drive. The space around the ship glowed a brilliant blue, and the ship slipped into the quiet swirl of the quantum stream. The alarms continued to blare, and the ship's status screens were showing damages that were severe, but the ship held itself together. The pilot let out the breath he didn't realize he was holding. They were alive, but for how long?
Sir,
The pilot's console exploded, throwing him across the cabin to land in a broken and bleeding heap. The prince stared at the dead pilot for several seconds before the gravity of what had just happened finally registered.
Engineer, status report.
His panic quickly turned to rage as his gaze moves from the dead pilot to the smoking mass that used to be the navigational control. He had always managed his darker emotions, but they now sharpened his senses and focused his thoughts. Returning to his personal console, he accessed the navigation system. The display lit up with layers of alarms. It took the prince precious minutes to filter and search the system for reliable information.
Nav control is offline. I will need some time to make repairs, but power to critical systems and the FLT are holding.
A white light appeared around the engineer as he moved from his console towards the cabin door. As the door closed behind him, the cabin was doused into darkness, with only a few sparks from broken consoles lighting the smoke-filled room. With a stroke of his hand over his arm plate, his armor lit up with the same soft white light befitting his status as royalty. A moment of panic crept into his chest as he realized he had no control over his ship. If the FTL drive was not shut down quickly, they would find themselves far from known space, or worse. They would become cosmic dust if they hit anything. The prince sat brooding in his useless command chair. He was well trained in warfare, but he had never been in a battle that he did not win easily. Minor uprises on subjugated worlds with low tech had not prepared him for the ferocity of the draconian attack. They must have someone inside the council giving them information. Only the royal court knew exactly where they would enter the draconian system. In hindsight, it was likely the draconian fleet was responsible for the latest attacks in this sector, knowing the king would send a senior team this time. It was a strategic attack to further weaken the kingdom. The prince swore under his breath as he realized the implications of this attack. They would not stop with one ship. There would be a full assault on the royal fleet now that they had played their hand. His first thought was to send a signal to his father once the power to communications was back online. He cursed again as he realized that any signal he sent would allow the Draconians to track it back to his position. He was in no shape for another battle and had no idea where in the universe they were heading. Frustration and rage mixed in his mind as he waited for the engineer to finish his repairs. The Watchers. In the beginning, the princess dusted of her robes as she stepped carefully through the wreckage of the damaged corridor that linked her lab to the living Curters. The white glow from her armor showed the horrible damage that the ship had taken during the attack. It had been brief, but devastating. Panels hung loose from the walls and ceiling, revealing still smoking circuits and power conduits. She could hear soft cries for help as she approached the common area. Smoke made it difficult to make out details, but soft blue light led her to one of the Guardians pinned beneath a pile of broken equipment. She moved what she could, but the larger pieces were too heavy for her small frame.
Be steady, Guardian. I will find help to get you free. Help him, Guardian.
The Guardian sounded both worried and relieved as he scrambled over the mess of equipment and furniture.
My princess.
Without a word, the Guardian reached down and with great effort he lifted the weight off the wounded guard. The princess pulled as hard as she could, but barely moved the heavy guard and his substantial armor. In her efforts, she was startled when another set of hands reached in and pulled the guard free. More heavy footsteps approached as the princess began administering care to the guard's wounds. There were now 2, no 3 Guardians standing at attention, awaiting orders.
Medkit.
She barked orders as she worked to slow the bleeding. One of the Guardians moved to a damaged panel, and with a jerk he tore the door clean off and reached inside and removed a silver case. He returned to the princess and bends to set the open case beside her. With deft hands, she reached into the case and removed a silver rod. With quick movements of her hand, the tip of the rod pulsed with green energy. Pressing the rod onto the wound, the green light intensified, and the Guardian stopped his groaning and lay still. The blood slowed and finally stopped as the green energy spread across his prone frame.
Bring him.
After several clicks, she stood and retraced her steps to her lab. The princess arranged his instrument as they lifted the wounded guard and laid him on a medical exam table. She worked silently, selecting different instruments that glow with different colors. Her hands worked automatically, years of training taking over her movements. Her mind took stock of their situation. The sensors showed that there were only 13 survivors from the attack. The princess, her brother the prince, the engineer, 5 Guardians, 2 low-breed female domestics, and a low-born mechanic whose primary responsibility was maintaining the sanitary systems. The princess's female assistant, who had been in the gardens when they were attacked, had also survived. Her quick thinking had saved her when she had donned a breather before the walls around her ruptured. She had minor frostbite, but that had been easily repaired. The assistances had royal blood, but no status in the royal court. Her aura was dark blue, not the light blue of the lords, or white like hers. The Guardian she had saved would recover. The engineer and the remaining crew were easily healed once the equipment was sorted. The prince was shaken to the core. He had never been so close to death, and his mortality screamed at him in his head. The other 18 crew members had been lost in the attack. The few remains that they found were discreetly packaged and spaced without ceremony. The princess had few friends, but she knew each and every one of them. The ship was badly damaged. The engineer had fixed as many critical systems as he could, but he could not shut down the FTL drive. It appeared that the corridor they had created in time and space had already been built using the energy it had accumulated during the attack, They were just along for the ride now. After a full rotation of very tense repairs, listening to the damaged ship protest as it hurls through the galaxy when the FTL finally just stopped. There were many repairs needed before they could breathe, and the prince surprised them by taking communications off of the repairs list. The princess and the engineer shared concerned looks. A conspiracy? The Draconians? Most likely both. It took another full rotation to secure life support and short-range sensors. Navigation was offline, and the FTL drive was so hot that by every metric used by the engineers, the core should have simply melted to vapor by now. It did not. It did nothing, and it would take some time to cool down. It took another full rotation to secure life support and short-range sensors. Navigation was offline, and the FTL drive was so hot that by every metric used by the engineers, the core should have simply melted to vapor by now. It did not. It did nothing, and it would take some time to cool down. Without long-range sensors and the navigation system, they could only estimate their exact location. But even as an estimate, 40 million light-years is a very long distance. Even worse news was awaiting her when she returned to the meeting room, where the prince was planning their unknown future. The engineers' repairs had given them hope that the ship could be repaired, but the ship was also extremely low on energy. What little power they had limited their options even further. They found themselves in uncharted space, far from the Empire or any other known galaxies. The engineer calculated that even if they were able to repair the FTL, they didn't have the energy to engage it even once, and certainly not enough to cover the incredible distance they needed to travel to get home. There were several star systems within range of their sensors. Unknown and uncharted, and in completely different directions from their present location. They found it odd that there were so few star systems in this area. It was like a void in space, unlike their own part of the galaxy. The engineers' calculations showed they had enough energy to reach only one of the nearby systems, so they had to choose well. They did not have enough power to make any mistakes. The princess worked beside the prince as they reviewed the limited data their instruments could provide. Running out of time, the prince finally decided on a yellow star on the edge of their sensor range. It showed promise, but they would need to commit to that direction and forsake other options. The decision made, the engineer moved them slowly towards the white sun, watching the ship's damaged status console and adjusting the systems as required. The princess continued monitoring the information from their sensors as they approached, her brow furrowed in concentration. It took 4 days to reach the outer rim of the system. By that time, they had identified 2 planets with water and a breathable atmosphere. The first was a rust-colored planet. It was old and was slowly dying. It had sufficient water near the poles, but the air was poor and the resources to repair the ship were sparse. There was evidence that the planet had been almost completely stripped of metals, leaving piles of broken rock and dust. The second planet had ample water and resources. The air was thick and had nurtured many large species of predators. Although the atmosphere was fairly dense, the yellow sun would be brutal on their skins. Precautions would need to be taken, but that seemed a small sacrifices to ensure their survival. The Watchers. The Blue Planet. They made the final preparations as they approached the Blue Planet, choosing a lush grassland near a wide river to land. This world had plenty of the metals and the other resources they would need to repair the ship. Although their scans had identified a diverse flora and fauna, it had also detected large roaming predators. Precautions were discussed, but repairs and recharging the ship were the priority. Their landing was uneventful, and the Guardians were able to retrieve clean water that was surprisingly clear of toxins, but abundantly full of microorganisms and viruses that had to be filtered out before it was safe to drink. One of the Guardians had a near miss with a large reptilian beast hiding in the shallows. Holographic reviews of the attack showed a large predator with a long jaw and razor-sharp teeth. The attack was swift and barely missed the Guardian. The other Guardians responded with plasma fire and killed the beast before it could attack again. The creatures on this planet moved with incredible speed, and the princess believed that their STR, or specific time reference, was many times faster than their own. It was not uncommon for isolated worlds to develop with different time references. The Falgaron worlds moved so slow, it would take many cycles just to have a conversation. The Gladerites moved quickly, like the creatures on this world. They had the technology to adapt to the planet's STR, and the princess quickly distributed the required equipment. The Guardians brought back the corpse, and it was determined that it was eatable, and quite tasty, once the meat was sanitized and cooked thoroughly. It was clear that without their technology, their species would never have survived on this planet. The Watchers. The Blue Planet. Now that they had established water, food, and a secure base camp, the discussions between the three leaders had turned to their next critical issue, power. Their talks covered many options, but they all ended with the reality that each of their options were unobtainable. It took weeks before a viable option was found. They needed to build a generator using the abundant resources they had discovered on this planet. The downside was that the generator they required would need to be massive if it was to produce the energy they required to recharge the ship to return to the Empire. The engineer was able to finalize the design quite quickly, but as they reviewed the details, it became obvious that they didn't have the means to complete the generator. The construction would take hundreds of thousands of years to complete, with only 5 Guardians and 2 females as laborers. They needed to recruit a large labor force if they were to have any chance of building the generator in their lifetime. The princess had reviewed every species that existed on this planet and had found none that were suitable for recruitment. There were large beasts that might be tamed, but the rest were good for food and little else. They needed sentient beings that could be convinced to help, and this planet had none. Their enhanced sensors had scanned most of the planet and had found animals with an aura no brighter than turquoise. None were sentient. Only a species with a blue aura would have the abilities they needed. They would need to be able to perform complex tasks and follow specific details, or their plan would fail. It had been long known that their aura would only remain clear of the red stain if they followed the mystic gospels, avoiding any forms of violence. This universe was created by the ancients as a bastion of free will. To use violence against another or to consciously impede their free will would ensure that their own soul would be forfeit. The Draconian Empire, and others like them in the universe, did not understand or care that their souls were corrupted by killing and enslaving other species. They would never ascend to the heavens. Their souls would be torn apart to rejoin the celestial realm as little more than scattered energy. From this radiant energy, new souls would form to begin their journey to enlightenment once again. The Empire understood that peace and love were the only way to protect their immortal soul from being destroyed and reset to the lowest yellow state. The enlightened people of the Empire would never risk their own souls, and they had an obligation to find, isolate, and contain any tainted soul when it was encountered. Every species in the Empire knew that if they remained pure light, they would continue their journey into the next life. Each time, their aura would grow brighter until they had reached ascension and could join the gods as equals. So, what did we learn here? The Empire has aspired to the perfect peaceful society and find themselves facing a species that ignores their science scoffs at their religion, and now they are coming for them. Context means everything when it comes to cultures and religious theologies. It is important that you, the reader, understands how powerful, controlling, and potentially dangerous dogma and religious doctrines can be. When you add scientific proof to these beliefs, the dogma becomes fact, and theologies can be proven with undeniable evidence. If you made it to the end, then like and subscribe. Turn on notifications for Chapter 2, the Ajiji.